Well, the past couple of weeks have been pretty awful for American journalists. Hundreds of reporters and editors at places like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed lost their jobs, victims of systemic changes to their industry. No matter what you think of those sites, it's sad. Anyone who's lost his job knows it's very tough. Now, those journalists suddenly have a lot in common with millions of other Americans: factory workers, loggers, retail clerks, coal miners. All of them and many more have seen their way of life disappear thanks to technology or outsourcing or private equity. This kind of thing has been going on a long time. Now, in previous cycles, what we used to call creative destruction, journalists had ready advice for newly unemployed blue-collar workers. Just learn to code. Coding is the future. Stop whining and embrace it. Here's a selection of headlines you might remember on that subject. This one's from NPR. From coal to code, a new path for laid-off miners in Kentucky. From Wired, the tech evangelist magazine. Can you teach a coal miner to code? From CBS News, out-of-work coal miners find new work in computer industry. And this from Bloomberg, Appalachian miners are learning to code. And from the venerable New York Times, the coders of Kentucky. See, it's that simple. Let's say you spent 30 years making a solid middle-class living in a paper mill in northern New Hampshire. Then one day the mill shuts down, sold for scrap to China. Happened a lot, but no problem. Just learn to code. Everyone in Brooklyn's doing it. Well, coding was never a real solution to any of this, obviously, but it had the effect of making journalists feel even more self-satisfied. And of course, that was the point. It's always the point, actually. Fast forward to this month. Someone on Twitter came up with a pretty brilliant piece of advice for all those laid-off journalists trying to figure out what to do with their lives. Learn to code. Perfect. Suddenly, learn to code was everywhere on Twitter. But journalists didn't see the humor in this at all. A former New Yorker employee called Talia Lavin called the phrase, quote, far-right hate. People who went to Wesleyan shouldn't have to learn to code. So they complained to the censorship authorities at Twitter, who immediately concluded that asking someone to learn to code might be, quote, targeted harassment, but only when it's directed at people who used to work at BuzzFeed. For the paper mill guy in New Hampshire, coding is still the future.